indicator is visible. The attack starts, but then suddenly disruptive flares deploy and the lead indicator vanishes. The auto-aim has been broken. Then when the disruptive flares expire and the lead indicator reappears, there's a delay while the auto-aim reacquires the target and readjusts. Disruptive flares buy you that time too. Hey, welcome back. I'm KTG Bomb. Today's video is called The Complete Guide to Disruptive Flares. You've probably heard many of the veterans in our KTG squad talk about how important disruptive flares are. But a lot of people still don't fully understand exactly how they work, how they're actually used in combat, or what timing and situations call for them. So today, I've put together everything you need to know about disruptive flares. All right, let's take a look at some reference footage first.
Booster flares, no! Splitting the throttles?
This is a famous scene from Top Gun Maverick. This is showing you a general example of how flares are used. Since Metalstorm is a fighter jet combat game, you probably already know the basics: when to use flares to evade incoming missiles, the right timing, and how to maneuver after deploying them, right? So today, instead of talking about regular flares in general, I'm going to focus specifically on disruptive flares. All right, let's get into it. Before I explain disruptive flares, I think it's worth going over how to tell fast flares and disruptive flares apart. So for regular flares, when you deploy regular flares, they shoot out as orange flares. The upgrade token for disruptive flares is an X shape. And when you actually deploy them, they glow red. Red orbs, right? On the other hand, fast flares increase your flare count by 1 and reduce the cooldown. They have a star-shaped token, and they fire as blue orbs. So during a match, just by looking at the color of the flares an enemy jet fires, you can instantly tell, oh, that's regular flares. Oh, they're using disruptive flares. Oh, that's fast flares. Now, disruptive flares is an upgrade token you can access once your jet reaches level 16 or higher. Regular flares only have an evasion function against enemy missile attacks, but disruptive flares. They also give you an additional ability to counter and react to enemy gun attacks. So just like regular flares, you use them the same way against missile attacks, but on top of that, you now have an extra tool when the enemy is coming at you with guns. Now, the missile lock-on prevention effect, what does that mean exactly? When an enemy jet locks onto you with a missile, there's a diamond circle that appears to allow them to lock on, right? That disappears for a set period of time. It used to last 1.5 seconds, but after the nerf, it's been changed to just 0.5 seconds. So the importance of the missile lock-on prevention has decreased quite a bit. For evading missiles, just use them the same way you would regular flares. The real added value against gun attacks is this: when an enemy fires their guns at you, using disruptive flares reduces the enemy's gun guidance range. As disruptive flares level up from level 1 to level 5, the gun range reduction gets bigger and bigger. At level 1, it reduces by 40%, and it scales up to 80% reduction at level 5. Let me explain this part in a bit more detail. Okay, so here you can see the gun range listed for each jet. The Delta Dart, A-10, and F-35 have the shortest gun range at 0.8 km, while the Viggen JA-37 has the longest at 2 km. On average, most jets have a gun range of around 1.1 kilometers. Since it gets complicated, let's use the Super Sabre F-100 with its 1 kilometer gun range as our baseline for the explanation. Let's assume the enemy jet is an F-100. My jet is trying to flee and the enemy is tailing me. For the enemy to gun me down, they need to get within that 1 kilometer gun range, right? Once they close into exactly 1 kilometer, they can start firing their guns. Let me explain this in more detail. When I'm chasing an enemy jet and that jet is within my gun range, a gun lead indicator appears showing where I can fire. This jet here is the F-1. The F-1 has a gun range of 1.1 kilometers, and the enemy jet I'm chasing is currently 0.33 kilometers ahead of me. That's within gun range, right? So the gun lead indicator appears and I can fire. On the flip side, if the target is outside gun range, say they're 1.5 kilometers ahead, the gun lead indicator won't appear. That's how you can judge the situation. Now back to the main topic. So, if an enemy jet is tailing me from 1 kilometer away, a gun lead indicator appears that lets them shoot at me. But at that exact moment, I deploy Disruptive Flares. If Disruptive Flares is at level 1, it reduces the enemy's gun range by 40%, right? So in this situation, the gun lead indicator that was aimed at me disappears. Because the enemy's gun range just dropped by 40% to 0.6 kilometer, meaning they now have to close in much closer to get a shot on me. Like this close. They need to get within 0.6 kilometer before the gun lead indicator reappears and they can fire at me again. With Disruptive Flares at level 5, the enemy doesn't just need to close from kilometer, they have to get all the way within 2 kilometers before a gun lead indicator can appear to shoot at me. That's the key mechanic to understand. So that wraps up the basic mechanics of how Disruptive Flares work. From here on, I'll be walking through various real match scenarios to show you exactly how to use Disruptive Flares in actual combat, the right timing, the right situations, all of it in detail. By the way, the duration of Disruptive Flares when deployed is 1.5 seconds. That means you have 1.5 seconds to reduce the enemy's gun guidance range. The first clip shows what happens when you use regular flares instead of Disruptive Flares against a gun attack. The Typhoon is going in with guns blazing at the enemy. They fire flares and they're orange. Those are regular flares being deployed. Regular flares do absolutely nothing against gun attacks. My guess for why this happens is that when you're getting hit, you instinctively and reflexively fire flares without thinking. Since you can swap between upgrade tokens depending on the situation, there's also a chance they thought they had Disruptive Flares equipped when they actually didn't. So the key takeaway here is to counter an enemy's gun attack, you need the redorbs, the Disruptive Flares equipped. I really want to stress that point. The next clip I'll show you features Disruptive Flares being used at a perfectly timed moment. Let me give you some context first. This is Vendetta's MiG-29. It has a gun range of 1.1 kilometers, and the enemy jet it's going up against is Red Scarf's F-5, which has Disruptive Flares at level 2. That means a 50% range reduction, so the moment Red Scarf deploys Disruptive Flares, the MiG-29's gun range instantly drops from 1.1 kilometer to 0.55 kilometer. Keep that in mind as we watch. Okay, you can see Red Scarf ahead, right? Range is 1.5, 1.4, 1.3, 1.2. The moment they enter range, Disruptive Flares kick in, so there's no gun lead indicator. So the attack right now isn't landing accurately. Then after 1.5 seconds, the gun lead indicator reappears. Now the attack starts pouring in, and in this absolutely critical moment, if Red Scarf hadn't had Disruptive Flares, they might have been shot down right there. So Disruptive Flares, when used at the right timing, can block a massive amount of damage from enemy gun attacks, and in life or death situations, this can be an incredibly powerful survival and evasion skill. The next clip I'll show you for reference is about facing an enemy who has Disruptive Flares at level 5. Again, this is Vendetta's MiG-29 with a 1.1 kilometer gun range, going up against Gravity's Typhoon, which has Disruptive Flares at level 5. In this case, the 1.1 kilometer range gets reduced all the way down to 0.22 kilometers. Keep that in mind as we watch the rest of this clip. There's Gravity's Typhoon, right? It's entered gun range, so the gun lead indicator is visible. The attack starts, but then suddenly disruptive flares deploy and the lead indicator vanishes. The auto-aim has been broken. Then when the disruptive flares expire and the lead indicator reappears, there's a delay while the auto-aim reacquires the target and readjusts. Disruptive flares buy you that time too. And when firing without a gun lead indicator into empty air, that leads to gun overheat. Because they're firing without focus, without a proper lock, that's what causes the overheat. When the lead indicator fades out, it means the gun has overheated and can't deal damage. So disruptive flares are giving you a 3-for-1 effect here. Once the overheat clears and the enemy aims and locks on again, disruptive flares are deployed a second time at exactly the right moment, and the gun lead indicator disappears again. But some damage did get through, right? What this tells us is that disruptive flares don't block 100% of the damage perfectly, they reduce a significant portion of it, but some still gets through. That's the right way to understand it. So to summarize this clip, the meaning of disruptive flares is this. When used at the right timing, it can reduce incoming gun damage for 1.5 seconds. Second, deploying disruptive flares breaks the enemy's auto-aim on their guns. And after the disruptive flares expire and auto-aim recovers, there's additional time the enemy needs to acquire, and re-aim, you gain that time too. It's more than just 1.5 seconds. And third, when the enemy fires their guns without a lead indicator that unfocused, aimless gunfire causes the gun to overheat. Disruptive flares deliver this triple benefit all at once. I hope that's something you can understand and take with you. This next clip is one I brought in to really drive home how critical it is when disruptive flares break the enemy's auto-aim. Here you'll see Gravity's Typhoon chasing All Jeans' JA-37, which has disruptive flares at level 3. For reference, level 3 reduces range by 60%, so it brings the 1.1 km gun range down to 0.44 km. Let's continue watching. Take a look, you can see All Jeans' JA-37, and the range is 0.57 kilometers. Even if disruptive flares are deployed here, they're already close to the edge of where they'd be effective. Keep that in mind as you watch. They're within gun range, so the lead indicator is visible. 0.58, 0.57. Gravity's Typhoon takes aim and opens fire, and the moment they fire, disruptive flares are deployed. And the gun lead indicator disappears, right? But at 0.48, they're nearly at the limit of where the disruptive flares effect can reach. And just like that, it breaks right away. Here's what this means, even though the 1.5 seconds of disruptive flares haven't passed yet. If the enemy jet pushes closer than what the disruptive flares level can reduce the gun range to, the effect breaks immediately. 0.47 kilometers, 0.44, that's roughly within the margin of error. So disruptive flares were used. They worked briefly, but because the enemy closed in too tight and went past the effective range reduction for that. Disruptive flares level, the effect broke right away. But let's see what effect it still had. Even in that brief instant, the disruptive flares broke the auto-aim. Since the auto-aim was disrupted and no-has to reacquire the target, it fails to deal proper damage to the enemy. So this clip also shows in an extreme way just how important it is that disruptive flares break the auto-aim. All Jeans barely had any HP left, and without disruptive flares, they would have been shot down on the spot. So to recap, disruptive flares have a different effective range reduction depending on the level. So even before the 1.5 seconds are up, if the enemy jet closes in past the effective reduced gun range, disruptive flares will break early. But even for just a split second, it's not only the 1.5 seconds that matter, the auto-aim being broken, and then the time the enemy needs to acquire and re-aim after it recovers, that can actually matter more than the 1.5 seconds themselves. So think of disruptive flares as having an effect that extends beyond its duration. Alright, this next clip is about timing with disruptive flares. All the clips so far showed disruptive flares used at the right timing. This one shows what happens when you use them a little too late. This time, Bomb YG's F1 is chasing Major's MiG-23, which has disruptive flares at level 3. Same as before, the F1 has a 1.1 kilometer range, and with level 3 disruptive flares reducing it by 60%, the 1.1 kilometer drops to 0.4 followers. Keep that in mind as we watch. Here we are at Crucible, cresting over the central hill and entering the area. There's Major's jet straight ahead. They're within range, so the gun lead indicator is visible, and above us, Hasa's Falcon is also attacking. It's a 2v1 situation. Gun damage is coming in, but no flares yet. A significant chunk of HP is getting shaved off right now. And now they use it. Since they waited until they'd taken that much damage to deploy, the incoming damage stops now. Once the disruptive flares expire, the gun lead indicator reappears, the attack resumes, and eventually Major's MiG-23 gets shot down. Here's something worth thinking about. What exactly is the right timing to deploy disruptive flares? I'll give you a proper breakdown later, but as you're watching these clips, think about it yourself. When should you use it? What's the right moment? We've already talked about gun range and how disruptive flares reduce it by 8%, so while watching these clips, try to judge for yourself that timing was too late, that earlier one was just right. The next clip shows what happens when you use disruptive flares too early. Let me show you that. I'll be showing you two clips side by side for comparison. The left clip is Hasa's Falcon. The right clip is Vendetta's MiG-29. In this clip, Hasa is not using disruptive flares. So just focus on Vendetta's disruptive flares timing. Both jets have a 1.1 kilometer gun range, and Vendetta has disruptive flares at level 2. So if deployed, they would reduce Hasa's 1.1 kilometer gun range down to 0.55 kilometers. Keep that in mind. Currently, Hasa is 2.3 kilometers ahead. Let's keep watching. Now 2.1 kilometers. And this is when they start deploying disruptive flares. Distance to the enemy 1.8 km. At 1.8 kilometers, even from Hasa's perspective, their gun range is only 1.1 kilometers, so even without disruptive flares, there's no gun lead indicator appearing right now anyway. In other words, this is a case of deploying the flares way too early. Now watch when do the disruptive flares expire. Right around the moment they're just about to enter gun range, the flares run out. And so from Hasa's side, the gun lead indicator on Vendetta's jet immediately becomes visible. So clearly disruptive flares were used way too early here. They burned them during a period where they weren't needed at all, so when Themament actually called for them, the gun range reduction effect was already gone. So in this case, they got absolutely zero benefit from disruptive flares. This is something you need to think carefully about. Just because you see an enemy ahead doesn't mean you instantly pop disruptive flares. If you do, you might miss the exact timing and end up with zero effect. What we learn here is this: the right time to use disruptive flares is when the enemy jet has entered your gun range, the range within which they can actually attack you with guns. That's the timing, simple as that. So as those earlier clips showed, whether it's the right timing, slightly late, or too early, even with the same disruptive flares, the actual effect you feel can be worlds apart. Next, I'll show you a clip where disruptive flares are essentially useless. Let me give some context. All Jeans' JA-37 has a gun range of 2 kilometers. Pretty long, right? And the enemy jet coming up is Red Scarf's F5, which has disruptive flares at level 2. Level 2 reduces range by 50%, so it cuts the Viggen's 2 kilometer range down to 1 kilometer. The thing is, because the Viggen's Bassa range is already so long, Having a low disruptive flares level doesn't shrink it much in practical terms. Be aware of this going in as we watch the clip. Look, Red Scarf's F5 is already within 997 kilo. As we saw, even if they deploy disruptive flares in this situation, they can only reduce the Vigen's range to 1 kilometers, and Red Scarf is already within that reduced range, so they can still get hit by guns. Watch! Disruptive flares deployed, but the gun lead indicator doesn't disappear. That's because they are already too close. The disruptive flares are doing nothing here. So that's the situation where Red Scarf's disruptive flares became completely useless, and there are two reasons for it. The enemy's gun range was way too long. That's one factor. And on top of that, Red Scarf's disruptive flares level was too low. This is exactly why we need to level up disruptive flares. Next, I'll show you a clip that really shows just how powerful a high disruptive flares level can be at its peak effectiveness. Disruptive flares reach their maximum effectiveness in two conditions: the shorter the enemy's gun range and the higher the disruptive flares level. So this time, we have Major's MiG-23 with a short gun range going up against Gravity's Typhoon with disruptive flares at level 5. In this case, the 0.9 kilometer range gets reduced all the way down to 0.18 kilometers. They'd basically have to be right on top of you before they can even get a gunshot off. Let's watch with that in mind. Gravity's Typhoon is at 2.5 kilometer ahead, still needs to get within 0.9 kilometer to fire. Closing in though, right? 0.7, 0.6, 0.5, still no lead indicator. At 0.9 kilometer, they enter gun range, and the gun lead indicator starts appearing. Disruptive flares deployed. Even at this close range of 0.4 kilometers, the disruptive flares effect holds. Watch this. Not until 0.19 kilometers does the disruptive flares finally break, and only then does the lead indicator reappear. So when the disruptive flares level is high but the enemy's gun range is short, once those flares activate, it becomes extremely difficult to shoot them down with guns. This clip gives you a really clear picture of why people push to level up their disruptive flares. Now, this next clip is basically the textbook example of disruptive flares. This time, Alljeans' JA-37 has a 2 kilometer gun range. The enemy jet is Red Scarf's F5 with disruptive flares at level 2. 50% reduction, as I said. That's a pretty rough matchup. Long gun range versus low disruptive flares level. So the 2 kilometer range only gets cut to 1 kilometer, pretty disadvantaged situation. Let's see how this match plays out with disruptive flares in the mix. Here you can see Red Scarf's F5 at 1.6 kilometers already within gun range. Alljeans starts firing. Damage hits. The moment damage lands, they deploy disruptive flares. Attack is coming in from the enemy, and the disruptive flares don't last long. Because the effective range is short, only 1 kilometer, the disruptive flares break almost immediately. But during that brief moment, the auto-aim is broken and has to reacquire, then overheat. Firing into empty air without landing hits causes the gun to overheat. These three things, the brief disruptive flares window, the broken auto-aim, and the gun overheat, all stack together to maximize the effect, creating a very unfavorable situation. The result, the Vigen with its long gun range fails to shoot down the F5 with its low disruptive flares level. Again, I want to emphasize the effect of disruptive flares is not just the 1.5-second window. It's about breaking auto-aim, forcing the enemy to spray into empty air, and inducing a faster overheat, causing them to fail to deal damage while burning through their gun cooldown. Keep that in mind. And the key timing for deploying disruptive flares in situations like this, the moment you take gun damage from the enemy, that's when you use them. If you can picture that timing and train that instinct, you'll find yourself using disruptive flares much more effectively in matches. All right, this is the last clip, and this one could also be called a textbook example of disruptive flares. Golden Fighter's Typhoon has a 1.1 kilometer gun range, and the enemy is All Jeans' JA-37 with disruptive flares at level 3, reducing range by 60%. So in this case, the gun range can be reduced down to 0.44 kilometer. Let's see how the match unfolds with disruptive flares. Golden Fighter's Typhoon spots All Jeans' yet. HP is running low. Gotta finish them off fast. Giving chase. And here disruptive flares are deployed. Not because of Golden Fighter, because a different enemy jet was firing guns from ahead. So they took almost no gun damage, right? The broken auto-aim is still trying to acquire, so the attacker couldn't get their shots to land. This shows you how critical auto-aim is for dealing gun damage. And now, the moment they close into gun range, disruptive flares are used. In this situation, Golden Fighter can't land proper hits, even though All Jeans is nearly dead. In the meantime, All Jeans survives and gets away, and Golden Fighter ends up getting shot down. This shows just how important it is to use disruptive flares at the right time when you're running on low HP. In a 2v1 situation with 2 enemy jets on you, using disruptive flares can keep you alive and even buy enough time for your teammates to shoot down Golden Fighter. That's the 3-for-1 effect in action. You can see just how important disruptive flares really are. I was so impressed by this clip that I put together a closing line: "One well-timed disruptive flare beats a level 5 daredevil turn any day." So that's everything today. We took a detailed and comprehensive look at how to use disruptive flares. I hope this helped raise your understanding of this skill, and I hope you now see just how important it is to use disruptive flares properly in real combat situations. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, hit like, and turn on notifications. I've been KTG Bomb. See you next time.